She thought she had it all. She thought she had won. But she didn't know. She never knew that the real game was just beginning. I can still see her face, that smug, rehearsed smile as her manicured nails tapped against the polished oak table. She didn't even look at me when the lawyer opened the will. She didn't need to. In her mind, it was already over. She thought she'd claimed everything. My dad's $154 million, his empire. But what she didn't know was that I had been planning for this moment long before the lawyer started speaking. I knew she was going to play her hand. She had no idea that I had one better. And this time, it wasn't about the money. It was about revenge. I never wanted to hate her. At first, I thought she was just the kind of woman Dad needed. Someone young, beautiful, and full of life. After Mom passed, I watched Dad slowly wither. He was brilliant, but lonely. When Vanessa came into our lives, I told myself maybe this was the one. She seemed to care about him. She laughed at his jokes, she called me kiddo, and she made dinner every Sunday. I let her in. I shouldn't have. But as time went on, things started to change. It was small at first. Missing family dinners, changing the locks when I wasn't home. Then the comments. Little jabs about how I was still figuring my life out, how Dad was too nice to me. I laughed it off, but something inside me started to twist. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something darker. One night, I overheard something that would change everything. I wasn't supposed to be listening, but I couldn't help it. I heard her voice, cold and clear, on the phone in the hallway. Once he's gone, I'll have it all. The kid won't get a cent. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened, every word cutting deeper than I could ever have imagined. She didn't even whisper. She didn't have to. She knew exactly who she was talking about, and she didn't care that I was standing just a few feet away. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just smiled, that same smug smile, and said, "This is how the world works, kiddo." That was the moment I realized everything I had trusted, everything I had believed about her, was a lie. And in that moment, I made my decision. She would pay for this. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just smiled. I knew then that patience would be my weapon. Vanessa thought she had everything figured out, that she was the one pulling the strings. What she didn't know was that I had been working behind the scenes for months. Long before my father's health began to fail, I started digging into the family trust. I made sure I was involved in every decision. I made sure the lawyers knew who had the final say. And when Dad was diagnosed, I knew what I had to do. It was a delicate process, but I worked with Robert, Dad's lawyer, a friend of 30 years, to make sure everything was set up. The will was changed. It wasn't a big change, just a clause, buried deep in the fine print, that would ensure Vanessa couldn't touch a single dollar without my approval. I knew she'd never see it coming. The day of the will reading finally arrived. I could feel the tension in the air as soon as I walked into the room. Vanessa was already sitting at the table, her black dress a stark contrast to the rest of us. She was poised, her lips curved into that same self-assured smile, like she already knew what was coming. But I knew better. The lawyer, Robert, called the meeting to order, and the moment the will was read, I saw her smile twitch. It started with the usual bequests, small donations to charities, gifts to the staff, but then Robert said my name. Her eyes locked on me, narrowing. To my daughter, Sarah, I leave full controlling interest in the Winston Holdings Trust, including all associated accounts, assets, and properties. Vanessa's face went pale. I could see the panic rising in her eyes as Robert paused. With the exception of the residence at 4 Park Lane and a living stipend of $100,000 per year, which I leave to my wife, Vanessa. Robert adjusted his glasses, then dropped the bomb. Per the clause in paragraph 14, any sale, lease, or transfer of trust assets requires the sole consent of Sarah. Without her written approval, you cannot liquidate or encumber any property within the trust. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me. I could see the fury burning in her eyes. But I didn't flinch. I just leaned back in my chair, calm, watching it all unfold. The months that followed were nothing short of satisfying. I watched as Vanessa's confidence cracked piece by piece. The house, the cars, the extravagant lifestyle she thought she was entitled to, it all started slipping away. She tried to sell off some of the properties, but every time, the deal fell through. Real estate brokers stopped calling. Her credit cards were declined. She spent days at the bank, desperately trying to get approval for loans that no one would give her. All the while, I stayed quiet. I didn't intervene right away. I let her think she still had control, let her get comfortable with the idea that she could win. But I wasn't done yet. One day, I got a call. She had tried to rent out the guest wing of the house for cash, without asking me. That's when I made my move. I sold the house, legally, without her approval. It was almost too easy. She was furious, of course, but she didn't have the power to stop it. The best part? I let her stay in the house for as long as she wanted, but I made sure she knew, every single day, that I was in control. She got her $100,000 per year, just like Dad had left her, but it wasn't enough to buy the life she thought she'd stolen. And I watched. I watched her squirm. The last time I saw her, she was standing outside the gates of the house, a suitcase at her feet. I could see the frustration in her eyes, the weight of defeat hanging over her like a cloud. She didn't look at me when I walked past her, but I stopped just for a second. I turned, took a long look at her and said, "Guess you were wrong, kiddo." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't say a word. She knew I had won. The best part? I wasn't even angry. I didn't need to rub it in. I had already won before she even knew it. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about patience, about knowing when to speak and when to wait in silence. It's about letting the ground shift under your enemy until they have no choice but to fall. Dad always said, "A sharp mind cuts deeper than a sharp blade." And I'd finally learned what he meant.